Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show will revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier, and today we are thrilled to welcome a country music legend. He's a Grammy-nominated performer, a CMA Award winner, the newest member of the Grand Ole Opry, and also has a new album out from Memphis to Muscle Shoals. Please help us welcome T. Graham Brown. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Well, you've had such an incredible career, and we have a lot to cover. But to start with, you were born in Georgia. Did you come from a musical family?
Not at all. You know, I'm kind of jealous of my friends that used to sit on the front porch with their daddy playing the guitar and singing. No, I didn't come from. It was exactly the opposite, actually. I didn't come from a musical family much. My grandmother on my mama's side could play the piano a little bit. And, you know, I took piano lessons for 3 years, but I didn't learn much.
So when did you start realizing that you had a knack for performing, for singing and everything?
You know, I don't know. I used to sing in church, and I used to sing just running around, being a kid. I would sing if I was playing baseball. Like if I was out in the outfield, I'd be singing during the game. I don't know. I would just sing. I wanted to be a baseball player. That was what I wanted. I went to I'm from, my family, both sides of my family are farmers. And my mom and daddy both grew up on dirt roads. My family didn't have any money, but they all worked their way up and worked their way out of there. My daddy went to the University of Georgia, and his brother and me and my brother and Sheila, my wife, we all went to Georgia. And I went to play baseball, and I wasn't getting to play. I was frustrated and sitting on the bench. And a friend of mine, you remember when you were in high school and somebody's mama and daddy would go out of town, and then all the kids would go over to the house and party and then clean it up so it would look like there was no party.
Of course.
Yeah.
You remember those nights? So,
Oh, yeah.
So I had a friend. I was in high school in Athens, Georgia, and I had a friend that could play the guitar. So he would bring his guitar, and he and I would sing for our friends in somebody's living room.
Nice.
And so I was trying to play baseball at Georgia, and we were doing fall practice. It was in 1973, I remember, at the Holiday Inn in Athens. And there was a little lounge in the Holiday Inn. And my friend said, "Hey, man, maybe I can get you an audition with the guy that runs the restaurant and the bar." And we didn't know anything. We didn't know nothing about nothing. And so we went in there one afternoon and sang probably 4 songs for this guy. And he said, "I'll hire you if you can play Tuesday through Saturdays, and I'll pay you $150 a week," which was huge.
Yeah.
And so I went back to baseball practice that afternoon after this audition, and I told my coach that I said, "Coach, all I've ever wanted to do was play baseball, but I can't stand sitting on the bench and not being able to play." And I just got through singing this guy a few songs over at the Holiday Inn, and he told me he'd pay me to sing, and I just don't know what to do. What do you think I ought to do? And he was a grandfatherly guy. His name was Jim Watley, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he looked deep into my eyes and he said, "Tony, if I was you, I'd go sing." So that was the beginning of my singing career, and we started at that Holiday Inn in October of 1973, and I have never done anything ever since.
That's awesome.
And you know what? At my mama's funeral last year, I had a buddy from high school that played third base for Georgia, and he told me that Coach Watley wrote an autobiography and put a few pages in there about me, about me going to sing. He said, like he told me to go sing, and so
No
I'm
kidding.
glad Coach Watley remembered me.
No kidding. Well, you started that early then. So who were your influences? Who were you listening to and wanted to be like?
Well, you know what? I grew up in the 60s mainly.
Mm-hmm.
People don't remember what a transistor radio was.
Oh, sure.
For your viewers and listeners, it was a little thing. It was a little radio. It ran on a 9-volt battery, and you could fit it in the palm of your hand. And I had that thing glued to my left ear. And I listened to everything in the 60s that was going on, rock and roll, the top 40 basically.
Right.
And it would be people like the Beatles and Otis Redding and Gary Puckett and the Union Gap and Rolling Stones and Paul Revere and the Raiders, Dave Clark 5, Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett, Percy Sledge, all that. And I just grew up loving soul music. I used to take that transistor radio into bed with me at night, and it was there was no FM, and I would scroll through the AM dial really slowly, and I could pick up these clear channel stations from Chicago and Nashville and New Orleans, and there was a great station called WOWO in Fort Wayne. I used to listen to that a lot at night. And you could tune in WLAC in Nashville, and it was all R&B. And Hoss Allen and John R. were the DJs. And I just listened to everything, man. I loved listening to at the time I was living in this little town in South Georgia, had 300 people in it. And I would daydream or night dream at night. I'd be listening to it at night and just wondering, man, I wonder what it's like to be in New Orleans, or I wonder what Chicago looks like. Or I would just dream about getting out of that little town. So the radio was kind of like it was a portal, I guess, that I could walk through, and just transported me to a whole nother world. It was great. Yeah. So the radio was great. I'm telling you, the radio was great. Yeah. I had a little record player. It was about the size of 2 shoe boxes, and it was Decca, DECCA. It was a Decca record player. And you lifted off the top, had a hinge on it, you raise the thing, and it would play 45s, 33s, and 78s. It had those speeds on it. I never had a stereo, man. I didn't have a stereo till I got out of home and in college. I finally got like a real stereo when I was able to afford to buy one. But I grew up with a little bitty record player with a little bitty records. I probably had 5 albums, something like that.
Well, what made you decide to? You were already married when you first moved to Nashville, right? I mean, yeah. So what made you decide that this is the time that we're going to go? We're going to bring the family.
Well, there was a guy named Randall Bramley, and he was on Polydor Records, and he was living in Athens. He had Randall Bramley. Then he was in a band called Sea Level. That had Chuck Lavelle and another guy from Athens. He was the only guy I knew that had a record deal. And I would always ask him the stupidest question. And it was, how do you get to be famous? That was what I would ask him. And I mean, I probably asked him that a half a dozen times. He was like a hero to me. So one night, Sheila and I were in, we had a 63 rusted out Volkswagen, And we were on the way to do a little demo there in Athens at John Keene's house. John Keene used to be my guitar player. He's the guy, he grew up to be like the Pro Tools guy. He wrote a book about Pro Tools. He recorded and produced REM and a bunch of new wave or punk rock acts in Nashville and alternative music. And I would go over there and record songs that I wrote. And so I had Randall Bramlett was in the back seat of that Volkswagen. And I remember he was drunk. And he doesn't drink anymore, but he was drunk and he was shooting me in the back of the head with a water pistol. And I asked him, how do you get to be famous? And he said, Brown, I'm going to tell you how you get to be famous. You get your ass out of Athens, Georgia, and you move to New York, LA, or Nashville, and don't ever ask me that question again. So when Sheila finished up her master's work at Georgia, she was going to go to vet school and was admitted to vet school. She came home to the farm. We were living on the farm. I don't know if I said it. Both sides of my family were farmers. And we were living on the farm, and she came and said, we got to go to Nashville. And I said, are you sure? What about vet school? And she said, well, let's go to Nashville because you'll be second guessing yourself the rest of your life if we don't go. And she said, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back and go to vet school. So that was in 1982. And we moved to Nashville and just started over at the bottom, singing demos and getting any kind of work we could get. And Sheila had a job at a department store during the day and waiting on tables at a restaurant at night. And I was singing demos, and we just kind of scratched out a living.
Oh, well, that leads me to my next question. How'd you get to become famous? No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, you know what? I finally found out fame is basically an empty lie. So
sure.
I don't care about famous anymore. That was just a phase, I guess. Still living a fantasy to me. It's great. I'm having a great time, man. I'm having more fun now than I've ever had. They made me a member of the opera, which is the biggest thing that ever happened to Sheila and me.
Absolutely.
And still out there touring, and I got a show on Sirius XM that's going into its 6th year, and get to be in a movie every now and then, and it's it's great.
We're going to get to all of that. I want to back up for one moment there, just to I want to ask you about you did a lot of commercial jingles for products. Taco Bell Run for the Border campaign is one of them. It's fascinating. And how'd you get involved in that? And what are the other ads that we know that you've been on that we can?
Oh man, my voice got passed around Music Row on these demo tapes. I was singing songwriter demos, and then the publishing company and the songwriters would pitch those songs, to record companies, producers, and all, whatever. And my voice got passed around Music Row. So there was a guy that liked my raspy voice, and he called me up, and it was golly, what was the name of that ad agency in Chicago? It's huge. They're still in business. Anyway, he called me up. His name was Ron Chancey, and he produced the Oak Ridge Boys. And we cut a McDonald's commercial, and it aired on the Super Bowl. And that was like the first one I did, and it was really popular. So I started getting calls, man. My phone started ringing. It was crazy. I did Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, Mountain Dew, Coors, Miller, Stroh's, Budweiser, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Burger King, Hardee's, KFC, Disneyland. I even did Sometimes You Feel Like a Nut, Sometimes You Don't. I did that for 7 years. So I was like the guy, I got a lot of calls. I probably did as many jingles as anybody's ever done. mean, I was really busy.
So what's it like? You're coming from a poor farmer from Georgia. All of a sudden, you're hearing your voice on a national campaign on radio. What's that like for you then?
Oh, it's surreal.
Sure.
I mean, just imagine. It's great. It's wonderful. It's like, hey, we're doing something. People are taking notice of what we're doing. So it's really good.
So how did that transition into singing? How did you get your break into singing from that?
Well, like I said, my voice got passed around town, and guy at Capitol Records heard it, and they offered me a deal. You ever heard of the Bluebird Cafe?
No, I don't
Well,
think it's.
there's a place called the Bluebird Cafe. It's legendary songwriter hangout. A lot of people have. It's been a springboard for people, and I was doing a little thing there. I did 3 showcases. I did a couple of showcases, didn't do any good, and then I did a 3rd showcase at the Bluebird, and there were some record people there, and so Capitol Records signed me anyway, and then I went in and cut a few songs, and they were going to see how they did, and the first single went high enough in the charts that they told me they wanted me to go in and finish an album. They wanted to put an album out. So then in the meantime, while I was cutting the album down in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, they put out a song called I Tell It Like It Used to Be. And while it was going up the charts is when we finished that album. And, I had a hit. And then the next, I had a decent run at radio. I never was the biggest star in the world, but I had probably 20 something Billboard chart singles. So I mean, it was okay.
I thought I was under the impression that Drowning in Memories was your first.
It was.
Well, single. Okay.
So yeah, I had a thing at the time. I don't know if they do. I don't know how they do it these days. I think it's a TikTok world now. If you're big on TikTok, they get you a record deal. But anyway, back then they had a thing called a singles deal. I had a 6 singles deal with Capitol, which meant that Capitol could put out a single, and if it didn't work, they had the option to put out a second single, and on up to 6 singles. Well, the first single was Drowning in Memories, and it went up high enough in the charts that they called for an album.
Oh, wow.
And then they put out this song, I Tell It Like It Used to Be. And while it was going up the charts, we finished the first album down in Muscle Shoals, and then they put the album out, and then, we had some hits after that.
Do you remember what it was like the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
Yeah,
How crazy is that?
Sheila and I, when that song came out, nobody in Nashville was playing it that we knew of. We got in that 63 Volkswagen, man, and we rode up to Kentucky. We stopped at a couple of radio stations. I had the record in my hand, and we couldn't get them to play it. Finally, we came to this little bitty station in the middle of nowhere, and we pulled up in the parking lot. I mean, it was a little bitty building. It had a tower, the tower was next to it. I went in there with that record, and I basically begged the guy to play it. And he said, okay, I'll play it. And we went out in that Volkswagen and turned the radio on. It was an AM radio, and I'll be danged. I'm going down again, drowning in memories. It was the first time that I had heard something like that. I had in Athens, Georgia, there was a local top 40 station, and I had cut a couple of little records down there, and I'd heard myself on the radio down there. We had local hits down there in Georgia, but the first, on a major label, that was where we heard it, in a little station in Kentucky.
Well, how did your life start to change then? You all of a sudden now you do jingles, you have hits on the radio. How does your life start to change?
Well, I got real busy. They threw me out on the road with Kenny Rogers. I had no experience except playing little clubs in Athens, Georgia. That was the only experience I had. But I'd been doing that for 9 years down there, so I was decent at it. But they threw me out on the road with Kenny Rogers when he was the biggest thing on the planet. And I mean, I went from nothing to playing to 15, 20,000 people,
What?
you know.
Wow.
And I just had to figure it out fast. I mean, I had to go out there and produce the first night. But I got used to it. And
Want to ask you about Kenny because I've been fortunate enough I saw Kenny in concert, great performer. So what was he like as a person backstage, and what did you learn anything from him about performing and everything?
well, he was really good. I studied him. I would watch his shows. He really knew what he was doing, and so I learned from that. But he was a great guy, man. He treated me, my band, the crew. He was great to the crew, his band. He always carried a chef, and everybody ate together. Kenny didn't take his meals in his dressing room or anything like that. He hung out with us. He was a regular guy, except he was super rich.
Yeah, apart from that.
But I mean, he was a regular guy. He had a tractor trailer. He had several tractor trailers, and one of them was a giant closet. And he had these great stage coats and shirts, and he would say, "Go out there in the truck and find something you like." I still got some Kenny Rogers clothes here at the house.
Wow.
I actually still wear some of them.
That's amazing to have a big rolling closet come follow you along on the road. That's pretty cool. So you perform with people like Tanya Tucker, the Oak Ridge Boys, who you mentioned, Sam Moore, Carol Channing. Now, what was it like? What was that like? What was she like?
It was awesome, man. Are you kidding? It was Carol Channing. I mean, how many times do you get a chance to sing with Carol Channing? I mean,
right.
It's one of the strangest duets I ever did, but I mean, it was Carol Channing. I couldn't say no. It was. Hey, man, you know what? I've had a wonderful career. I've gotten to work with all my heroes and get to know them and be friends with them, and I've been blessed. I'm really happy.
Mm-hmm.
Sheila and I've been together 46 years.
Wow.
And I think we're happier now than we've ever been. It's great. We're living the dream, baby.
I want to talk about the new album, From Memphis to Muscle Shoals. So you perform with what an eclectic group of singers. I mean, just look at some of these names: Winona, Sam Moore, Dwight Yoakam, Sammy Hagar, and Little Anthony. So how did this album come about? And did you personally select the singers to perform with you?
Yeah. Well, what happened was I've been wanting to do a 60s soul tribute album. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to cut a bunch of soul songs I grew up with. So I went down to Muscle Shoals, and I've been going to Muscle Shoals since '84. So I know all the people down there, and it's a great place. So we went in this studio called Fame, and there's a lot of hits that have been cut in that little room, man. We were in that same little room. You actually used one of the keyboards that was used on You Better Move On, Arthur Alexander song from 1962, I think. I think that was the first hit ever cut in Muscle Shoals. And, Percy Sledge and on. And we cut 14 tracks in 2 days. And then we went over to Wishbone Studio, which is another historic studio, and did all the vocals over there. So there was a bunch of us that came out our first albums came out within the same year. It was Randy Travis, Keith Whitley, Steve Earle, Marty Stewart, Dwight Yoakam, I think maybe Patty Loveless, and me. And so we've always remained friends. That would have been probably 85 to 6, let's say. And we've all remained friends. We love each other. We stay in contact with each other. Even Randy Travis can't speak now, but I see him all the time. He's great. So we've all remained friends.
That's good.
So I was just talking to Dwight Yoakam, just catching up. And he asked me what I'd been doing. And I told him, we went down to Muscle Shoals and cut these 14 tracks. And he asked me, he said, by any chance, did you cut a song called I'm Your Puppet? And I said, yeah, man, matter of fact, I did. And he said, can I sing on it? And I said, heck yeah, you can sing on it. So he went in the studio out in Hollywood and did a duet. And then he went back and sang harmony on everything, which is, it was pretty involved, and so he spent a lot of time on it. He's a perfectionist, and so when I heard his duet, I thought, man, maybe I ought to call Tanya. So I called Tanya, and she did it. Now, see, this thing didn't start out to be a duet album at all. That was never in our minds. But once Dwight did one, I just started calling people.
That's great.
That I thought would be fun and good, and I'm so happy. Once I started thinking about duets, I thought, man, wouldn't it be great to do a tribute to these older artists that don't record anymore? And so that's why I called up Sam Moore first, because he's 80. He's 87. He's 88 now, I think. When he sang his part, I think he was 86, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I called Little Anthony, and Little Anthony's like 84, and Delbert McClinton is 83, I think, and Eddie Floyd's probably 86. So I just wanted everybody to see that these folks could still carry the mail. And I called Betty LaVette too, and she's not 80 yet. She's 70 something, and heck, I'll be 70 in a few months. So it's like, what's old to me now is it's all relative. So what I used to think was old is not old anymore.
Right.
And so Sammy Hagar's probably 75, something like that. Betty LaVette, I guess, is 78, maybe 77, something. So anyway, I just called up folks, and they all said yes.
That's amazing. Who is it who's out there who you've always wanted to work with, that someone you admire or look up to? Who's out there that you haven't just had a chance to yet, or the opportunity? Anybody?
Golly,
probably.
Well, I would Tom Petty, Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett. Most of them are dead. I'd love to do something with Bob Seger. I love Bob Seger.
Oh, yeah.
You know who else I'd love to do something with is Randy Bachman. I think that would be fun.
That would be fun. I'd love to hear
the Doobie Brothers. Michael McDonald is one I'd really.
I just had on Blackwater. That song is on my. It's always in my rotation. I would just listen.
The Doobies are awesome, man. They're John Cowan's a friend of mine. He plays bass with them now. Man, those guys are great. And Michael McDonald has rejoined the Doobies now, and they're getting ready to do a new album with Michael McDonald. So they're still going. And who else? I'd love to do something with Chicago. Would be great.
Yeah.
As I don't know, man. Andre Bocelli. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
I would love to do a song with him.
That would be fun. I want to change gears for 1 second here. So you were in this really fun movie, Heartbreak Hotel. So it starred David Keith, Tuesday Weld, Charlie Schlatter, directed by Chris Columbus, who went on to direct Home Alone and Harry Potter. So how did you come to that film? And can you tell us your experiences on that?
Well, David Keith's a friend of mine. So it was because of him. And we went out to Austin, Texas for 3 weeks, I guess, or a month, something like that. It was fun, man. Chris Columbus was great. I mean, he was just starting out. I don't know if that was his first big movie or maybe his second, something like that. He was wonderful. Chris Columbus was great to work with. It was just fun, man. I mean, David Keith was being Elvis, and
Right.
I was being Jerry Schilling. It was funny. Jerry Schilling wrote me a letter while we were doing it, and it was like 1 sentence long. It said, like, "Dear T. Graham, if you are to continue in the role of Jerry Schilling, you must lose weight immediately." It was signed by Jerry Schilling.
Wow.
That's great.
Funny. You've done other movies. You had a cameo in 1977. Richard Pryor's movie, was it Grease Lightning or no, not Grease Lightning? Yeah, Grease Lightning.
Yeah.
What was that like working with Pryor? I mean, that's pretty cool.
That was fun, man. I hung out over there for about 6 weeks, I guess. The most fun part of it was, Richie Havens.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so Richie Havens and I really hit it off. And Richie Havens came to my house. And then one night we went to a club in Athens, Georgia. And Richie sat on a stool, and me and all my friends sat on the dance floor, and he sat there and sang all night for us. Wow. That was one of the very best things about that movie. But yeah, it was great hanging out with Bo Bridges was in it, and Cleavon Little was in it, and Richard Pryor. They were all real nice to me.
Yeah.
And what about the movie? You were in a movie this year, A Nashville Wish. Can you tell us a little about that?
Boy, was I fat. I've lost weight since then. That was fun. I was just goofing off, basically being myself, that was really fun. I made some good friends on that. Kevin Sizemore was one of the leads in there, and he's become a really, really good buddy of mine. He's out in Hollywood. That was fun. I sang in it, it was just a little heartwarming, corny little movie, but it was fun.
That's cool. All right. So earlier this year, you were asked to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. That is like the Hall of Fame, man. I watched the video of you accepting you're on stage. You can't watch that and not get choked up. It was so genuine how it hit you and how you accepted it, and the moment was so fantastic. It was so organic. So tell us about that.
Well, golly, so funny, man. Vince has been a friend of mine since the mid '80s, and we've played golf together. We've goofed off together. We've been really, just pals. And I have this show on Sirius XM, and I always have a guest, an artist guest. And I've had Vince on there before, but I got a call from the Sirius people in New York wanting to know if I wanted to interview Vince. And I thought it was kind of weird because I got Vince's number. If I ever need him, I just call him up myself. But anyway, I said, I kind of scratched my head, and I said, yeah, that'd be great. And Sirius XM has their studios here in Nashville. They have a big room that's a live music venue. It's got a stage in it, and it's got probably 100 seats, so that they have these little concerts in there, and they broadcast them live. That's what the room's for. So I was going to interview Vince. He was going to be my guest. And they told me I had 30 minutes because Vince had to be somewhere else. And so we were sitting on these stools on stage and just swapping stories. And he'd sing a song, I'd sing a song, that kind of thing. And there was a live audience there. And I was watching the clock, and it had gone 3 minutes past the 30-minute time that I was told I had. And I started winding the interview up, wrapping it up, like, hey, Vince, thanks for coming. I see it's time, to leave and all that. And he said, well, wait a minute. How many times you done the Grand Ole Opry?
How many times you done the Opry? 300?
400.
400? I was asked to come here by the Opry to invite you to be the next member.
No. Yeah. And at first I went all bull. That was my response.
I heard that.
But then the Grand Ole Opry people had been kind of hiding out. And when they walked out, I knew it was real.
Wow.
And Sheila was there, and we just cried. Man, we've been wanting to be members of Grand Ole Opry forever. I've so wanted this.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of the Opry, man. And like you said, man, it's kind of like the Hall of Fame. It doesn't get much better than being a member of the Opry.
Nothing about him that feels anything but genuine and open and kind, and that goes a long way.
I'm very emotional to everybody.
Yeah. Hey, it's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
In 51 years of singing, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened for Sheila and me.
That's great.
The newest member of the Grand Ole Opry, T. Graham Brown.
It's for Sheila as much as anything.
It's wonderful.
Pretty
The Opry's wonderful. It's such an institution. It's awesome to be a part of it. They have this wall with a bunch of plaques on it with Opry members' names, and now my name's up there. They let me screw in my own plaque.
That's
So
great.
when I walk in, I always touch it and say a quick prayer. It's really neat.
Just outstanding.
Well, you mentioned your show, your Sirius XM show. So how did that first start coming about?
Oh man, I begged them for about 2 years, and they kept saying no. And then finally they said, okay. And next month we'll be starting the 6th year of it. So it's pretty popular, I guess, because they called me last month asking me if I wanted to sign another contract for another year. And I said, heck yeah, let's do it.
Oh, for those who don't know, can you tell us where we can find it, what station and everything?
Well, it's on a channel called Prime Country. It's channel 58 on Sirius, and the name of the show is Live Wire, and I play live cuts from artists' live albums. That's what it is, and it's supposed to be an hour show, but it's usually an hour and a half. They don't care. They have never once told me what to do or what to play or who to get as a guest. I just do all that myself.
Right.
And I research everything. I have to find the records, and I tell the guy in New York what I want to play, and he finds the stuff for me and see if it's in their data bank or whatever. And then sometimes we have to buy the record. Sometimes I'll have the record, whatever.
Well,
And then they air it 10 times during the month. I do one a month, and I have a guest, and they air it 10 times during the month. And then they have, what's really cool is they have this mobile app that you can download if you're a subscriber, and it's got this on-demand search bar. And so you can just type in Livewire, and all these back episodes come up, so people can listen to back episodes too. And it's pretty neat.
well, very neat. But all right, so by the time this airs, the time we post this, From Memphis to Muscle Shoals will be out already. So I want to know what you're working on next.
I got a gospel album I'm fixing to do with Ben Isaacs. You know who the Isaacs are?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're a family of singers and players.
Yeah.
Well, one of them, they're members of Grand Ole Opry too. One of them is Ben Isaacs. He's a big old guy. He's about 6'5", something like that. But he's a great musician and producer. And he and I are going to co-produce this gospel album. It's going to be for Gaither, the biggest gospel. I think they're the biggest gospel label in the world, maybe. I'm going to do that. And then I'm thinking about doing like this From Memphis to Muscle Shoals records, old 60s soul stuff. I'm thinking about doing an old 60s country record and pick out some classic country songs and maybe do them. And then I got to make another T. Graham Brown record. I'm fixing to get a budget for that too. These people want me to do like a record of all original songs. So I got a lot of stuff to do, man.
Well, that's great. Well, anytime you want to come back and talk about them, we'd love to have you. How can people follow you on social media?
Everything about me is under T. Graham Brown. Just you can Google T. Graham Brown, and our Facebook page will pop up, and Instagram, X, all that. And we have tgrahambrown.com, which is our website. And you can go on there and find out our schedule, where we're touring. You can, buy From Memphis to Muscle Shoals is on there. There's some more albums that are on there if you don't have my stuff. And, all the usual swag, shirts, caps, all that stuff. And what's going to be cool is we're going to do a issue that From Memphis to Muscle Shoals on vinyl also. So we're going to have that. And I think we're going to go back and get some of these albums that we own from the past and put them on vinyl too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, yeah, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. We're big fans of yours, and this was a lot of fun to get to hear your stories.
Thanks, man.
Before you go anywhere, well, who's your team? I know you love baseball still because you wanted to play. Who's your team?
The Braves.
Oh, the Braves. Okay. Well,
hey, you know what? When I was 13, let me see, what year would that have been? 13. I think it was 66. Actually, I must have been 12. We went to the very first game that the Atlanta Braves ever played.
Wow.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
you know what I remember most about that trip? Because we were living in South Georgia, and so we had to drive about 3 hours to get there. We stopped at a truck stop or a gas station in Macon, Georgia, and they had a minor bird in a cage. You know what a minor bird is? It was the first time I ever saw a talking bird, and it blew my mind. That's one thing I can remember about that first trip to Atlanta Braves. I saw a minor bird for the first time.
Very cool. That's cool, man.
Ain't that something crazy? That's something crazy to remember, isn't it?
Gosh, man, we can go on forever. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, this has been fascinating.
Oh, well, thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come back anytime you want me to.
All right.
Appreciate that. So again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Moosie Drier. And again, a very special thanks to T. Graham Brown. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.